The death of Robin Hood wasn't disappointing because it had bad acting, weak themes, or poor cinematography. In fact, I think it succeeded in all those areas. The reason it disappointed me is because it failed to maintain the tension it spent the first half building. The first half of the film is brutal. Characters die unexpectedly, violence feels impactful, and it constantly feels like Robin Hood's past is catching up to him. As a viewer, you're waiting for that conflict to explode. Instead of escalating that tension, the second half repeatedly pauses for long fireside conversations. While some of these moments add to the story, many feel disconnected from the central conflict. Once the tension disappears, the movie never really recovers or replaces it with anything equally engaging. Slowing down the pacing could have worked if those quieter moments focused on conversations and character development that meaningfully pushed the story forward. Instead, a lot of the dialogue feels detached from the central conflict. To make matters worse, some of it is delivered with thick accents or a muffled tone, making it difficult to catch what the characters are saying. When you're already trying to stay engaged during a slower section of the film, missing key lines only pulls you out of it even more. What initially feels like an inevitable collision between Robin Hood and the consequences of his actions eventually become bogged down by uneven pacing and conversations that don't always justify the time they take. As a result, the movie loses the momentum that made its opening act so compelling. The movie also struggles with its secondary antagonist, the young boy. His family's tragedy is the catalyst for much of the story, essentially giving him a clear motivation for revenge against Robin Hood and his bloodline. But the problem is, he's largely isolated throughout the film. With the men who would support him gone, he never really has the resources, influence, or presence needed to make a legitimate threat to Robin. Because of that, it's difficult to ever take his pursuit seriously on a tense level. Once that credibility isn't there, the suspense around him fades as well. And since the movie doesn't do enough to establish him as a true opposing force, that tension never really returns once it's lost. That's why the death of Robin Hood ultimately disappointed me. Not because it lacked strong performances, themes, or atmosphere, but because it failed to capitalize on the tension and momentum it built so effectively in its opening act. The movie spends so much time convincing you that Robin Hood's past is finally catching up to him, only to pull back when it matters most. What could have been a tense and emotionally satisfying conclusion instead feels like a story that loses momentum, confidence, and everything above. And that's why, despite everything it does well, the death of Robin Hood left me wanting more.